I took my daughter to see a Broadway play this week. For those of you who've been listening to Team Human for a while, you may know that I have a complicated relationship with theater. It was everything to me for a number of decades, from the time I was 11 to about 33. And I just loved the way theater gave permission for people to tell the truth, to reframe issues in ways that can penetrate ignorance or prejudice, to pay tribute to human collaboration through the very cooperative act that theater represents, not just between the actors on stage, but between the actors and the audience. I remember as a kid, I was just amazed that people in the audience didn't simply stand up in the middle of the play and scream. By my late 20s, though, I grew pretty exasperated with theater. The high prices of tickets kept most live theater really aimed at the elite. And I was looking at directing a production, I remember, of Threepenny Opera for a regional theater. And the tickets, the cheapest tickets, were going to be $40. And worse, because it was all of these high-paying patrons who made theater really work, the work itself tended less toward waking people up to social injustice and economic inequality than simply making people feel better about the social injustice that they were perpetrating, as if attending the play were itself some kind of penance. I remember I was standing in the lobby during the intermission of a play I had been directing, and I used to always go to the lobby during intermission just to sample the audience response. And I heard these two women talking about the AIDS crisis. And one of them, I remember she said, "Oh, yes, I saw the play. So sad." She was talking about Angels in America, as if being able to cry for a gay person was some sort of test, and she had passed. That the play didn't spur her to take action, but to feel better about her inaction. And besides, at the time, the theater was giving way, really, to the internet, which was promising this way more interactive, bottom-up, egalitarian, non-commercial people's medium. And for me, anyway, the rest is history. The net turned out to be an even greater distraction from the business at hand, and here I am talking about how to return to embodied local human experiences. And the thing I keep wondering about, though, is whether we have time for any of this right now. As the conversation we're going to have about climate change today will make clear, we are in an all-hands-on-deck moment. And I fear that instead of asking what needs to be done, most of us, we're asking, how can what I already love to do be directed toward accomplishing what needs to be done? How can my pottery, my mathematics, my yoga instruction, my miniature golf course design, my puppetry, my sound design, my narrativity, whatever that means, how can that all be geared toward making the world a place where humans and millions of other species don't have to go extinct? Rather than asking, what can I do right now to prevent topsoil depletion, to reduce plastic containers or jet fuel consumption, which sound like more direct action for an all-hands-on-deck moment. I have friends and relatives actually purchasing shotguns to keep just in case, yet they're just still working at their jobs and hoping for the best. But I went and saw this musical, this Come From Away, just because my daughter's middle school teacher said she simply had to see it. And I gotta say, it really touched me. It was about the people of Gander, which is this small town in Newfoundland, Canada, that happened to have a big old disused airport that welcomed about 7,000 passengers who were grounded when the airspace was closed after the 9/11 attacks on the U.S. And the play itself is super simple. It's this musical about how they got beds ready in the public school and tried to take care of all the confused and traumatized people. But it was a really emotional ride. All these normal, basic, socially responsible behaviors elicited tears from a whole lot of people there. And I sat there thinking about the moment of goodwill following 9/11, that sense of possibility, even before the possibility for a teaching moment on the limits of empire, just the normal response of people to the misfortune of others. And it seemed like a different world from the one we're living in today. And I thought about my daughter growing up in a moment where those behaviors appear strange and old-fashioned, like from another time, which it was. And in fact, the play works precisely because things are so different right now. It's less a piece about that moment than, at least in contrast, about ours. But it's also a lesson in the way the recognition and acknowledgement of a crisis can motivate people to act. It can bring us out of our daily trance and give us a chance to become part of a mission greater than ourselves. And sure, that could mean, like in this play, just playing fiddle to entertain people who are worried about their loved ones in New York, or today, I don't know, doing puppet shows for refugees, or developing non-extractive currencies for exploited African villagers, or even making a podcast that people really need to hear and get to stay on deck themselves. But I think we have to be really careful just how far from the impulse, that original impulse to do good, that we get. You know, when I think of Danielle Butin, who's a guest that we had on a couple of years ago, she gathers unused medical supplies and ships them to Africa, employing dozens of people with autism and other challenges to work in her warehouse. That's when I see someone engaged in unequivocally direct action. Or our friends at Extinction Rebellion, or people growing and making food as responsibly as possible, spending more time and energy or making less short-term profit in order to rest the soil or limit runoff. Or an author choosing to write a book that is aimed at nothing other than waking people up to the catastrophe in progress as clearly and urgently as possible. Like a doctor telling an alcoholic his liver cannot go on this way. This is important work, like all the slightly indirect things that most of us are doing. But I think it's time for all of us who've adapted our work to the current crisis to remember that we must also adapt ourselves to the actual work that needs to be done. All hands on deck.